Chapter 13, The Feast, the Second Day, from E.S. Drower's Peacock Angel. Choose with me to go shepherding, with me to milk the flocks, and to pour the sharp rennet in, and to fix the cheeses. Eucritus and Del 11. During the night there were thunderstorms and heavy rain, and when we rose, we found the hilltops veiled by clouds, and the sky gray and sunless. As we sat at breakfast, a woman arrived with a dish of curded milk, good sheep's milk, Laban. We did not see her, but Michael said that she had brought it from the deacon's house. Beit Ash Shmas. There are 2 Jacobite deacons, so a little later we sought the advice of our neighbors as to which Shmas it could be. It would not be Deacon Ayub, they said, considering as he has no sheep. It must be Deacon Hannah. Accordingly, we sought out Deacon Hannah's house. We were warmly welcomed at the door to the courtyard, and within a bench was placed for us on the raised platform, upon which sat the mistress of the house, some of her daughters-in-law, and their children. The house mistress was engaged in sewing bright green silk and fitting it on to the ends of tightly stuffed pillows. These, hard and solid, are used either as head pillows in bed or as supports when sitting on the floor during the day. The silk covers the ends. The center part is filled with a white calico slip, which can be removed and washed. It was a large house, and the several families of married sons lived in the compound. Not only was it a patriarchal dwelling, but as A remarked, it was a village in itself, for the various activities of milling, soap boiling, olive pressing, baking, and so on took place in various chambers, either above or below ground. The sheep, goats, and donkeys had their quarters beneath the ground level, and underground too were the tall earthenware bins, oblong in shape, with a decoration of clay ribbon round the tops. In these were stored wheat, lentils, beans, chopped straw, and grains of all kinds. Sharing the same subterranean chamber was a mill for grinding sesame, previously crushed in the open courtyard above by the Dakbaka, a heavy stone roller attached to a center pin on a raised platform. A long rod from the center connected with a mule or donkey who trod round and round till the seed was ready. The sesame mill below was simply 2 round, pitted black millstones that looked as if they were made of lava. The mill is variously called Raha, Madar, or Chakara. The sesame is then roasted a little and becomes thick and oily. Mixed with honey or fruit syrup, it is used like jam, scooped up on the thin bread. If sesame oil is required, they pour water upon the crushed seed to separate the heavy elements from the oil, which floats to the surface. The residue, filth, is sold or used in a variety of dishes. For instance, it may be prepared with raisins as a sweetmeat. In the upper rooms were stores, homemade cheeses, jars of amphora, shape filled with dried fruits, dates, nuts, lentils, and other good things, petroleum tins containing olive oil, and piles of maturing olive oil soap. The soap was of 2 kinds, one for toilet use and for clothes, the other for rougher purposes. Vine leaves, dried and threaded on string, were festooned on the walls. These are used for doma, small rissoles, vine leaves, eggplant, or gherkins stuffed with savory rice, meat, and spices. Wheat is crushed by the mill in the yard to make the bull, or aisha. Eaten like rice with meat, are mixed into a kind of porridge. Opposite the living room was the bakehouse, and we went thither to watch women baking and making the kleitcha for the feast. These look and taste like mince pies. The filling is of dates, raisins, nuts, sugar, pepper, kebaba, cinnamon, and cooking butter. Dihin. The pastry, which is heavy, is folded about this mixture, and the women dip their bare hands into a basin of egg set before them, and then rub yolk on the pies to make the crust yellow. The egg also serves to glue the cakes to the hot wall of oven. This is a large, concave, earthen affair, previously heated by burning straw mixed with dung. We looked into it and saw the half-baked kleitcha adhering to the wall. I asked how they made bread. It is of wheaten flour, they said, and unleavened. We add some salt and a little sesame flour. The dough is mixed and rolled out on a smooth round stone table. The fursha standing upon 3 stone feet. Terrasse. This stone table is about 1.5 feet across. The wooden roller, not unlike our own domestic rolling pin, is called the shabak. When the dough has been rolled out thin, a long, thickish rod called the neshabeh completes the shaping. The dough is lifted carefully, for it is as thin as paper, and placed on a leather cushion, and with this it is dexterously slapped against the oven wall. The result is the local khubz or kak. The Kurdish word is naan. It is white, wholesome to the taste, and can be easily folded. People wrap their meat in it to save their fingers from grease, and use it like a spoon or scoop as well, when thus prying into household secrets. We had consumed numerous glasses of sweet tea, eaten some bread dipped into sesame, and smoked cigarettes with our hostess, also bestowed evil eye beads and chocolates on the children. Now, we went on our way, followed by cordial leave takings and smiles. I sat a while on our roof, which overlooked a neighbor's house yard. 5 or 6 children in stages, from a baby that crawled on all 4s over dirt, manure, and mess, shared the yard, cocks and hens, a grimy and partially hairless white donkey, and several large shaggy dogs, eternally scratching at ticks and fleas. The yard included a half-built room, a heap of stones, and a pit. 2 or 3 living rooms opened out of it, and a stone stair led onto the roof and the reception room. Presently, another donkey arrived with wet pitchers of water slung 2 aside on its back, led by a barefoot maiden. She wore a blue cotton skirt, a loose faded red coat, and the usual headdress of turban, kerchiefs, and coins. Her pigtails, prolonged by black wool, were fastened by silver pendants, and she wore a large necklace of amber beads. The mother once wiped the baby clean with its own soiled garment, turning its clothes above its head to do so, and later poured a little water from one of the jars over the said garment, rubbed it a little, and put it with the other drying clothes on the heap of stones. The dirty water fell to the ground, which was the baby's playpen, but that did not trouble her, nor the cloud of flies. Bedding was spread on the terraced roof, and a sleeping dog lay with it in the fitful sun. Sometimes black kids appeared from nowhere and skipped up the stairs or gumbled in the yard. Behind were the green hills, aromatic with 1,000 herbs, and in the noonday silence, the inconsequent music of a panpipe was heard. By the afternoon, the sun had conquered, and we were invited to the house of the Kurdish sergeant of police, near the entrance to the village and the square where gambling for colored eggs was still in progress. His wife, a matron wearing a purple velvet jacket, came out with words of welcome to receive us, a smile of welcome on her comely face, and took us into their reception room, spotlessly clean and well kept. Upon the walls were ornaments made of folded cigarette pencil in various colors. I referred to this form of domestic decoration above, as well as framed pictures. There was the usual colored picture of the Kaaba, for our host was a Muslim, and there were spirited delineations of the warrior Antar and the wise King Solomon. Well, Islam doesn't allow graven images, so. Antar, a black warrior, was cleaving the head of an enemy horseman, from whose skull large drops of blood spurted. Sword having cleft the head as far as the mouth, the victim wore a dolorous expression, but still bestrode his steed. Behind the swordsman, a damsel, perhaps Apla, sat in a howdah on her camel, extending a branch, perhaps laurels of victory, towards her hero. The other picture appeared to be by the same artist. It showed Solomon on his throne, his courtiers about him, and a group of animals standing before him, perhaps as he said to have understood their language, he was listening to what they said. A hoopoe hovered near his head, and to the left of the group stood a tall jinni, looking with his horns, puff and tail, for all the world like the personage whose name the Yazidis will not utter. Photographs of the sergeant and his children were also about the room, but not one of his handsome wife. I offered to take her picture, but he refused politely. It was not the custom of the Kurds, he said. Melancholy lay on the household in spite of our hostess's smile, for the sergeant had only held temporary rank and had that day, through no fault, been deprived of a stripe. It was, it seemed, a question of pay. An order had come from Baghdad that the numbers of those holding temporary rank were to be reduced, and the sergeant was not alone in his disappointment. And there's 5 dots. I'm not sure whether there's something missing or whether that's just, decoration that sometimes occurs in the pages of some of these old books. And, well, 6-pointed stars, asterisks. In the square, they were still gambling for eggs. Towards evening, we wandered out towards the forbidden ground, the shrine of Sheikh Mohammed. The door stood open, and the green courtyard and shrine behind it looked inviting. We lingered by the threshold and looked in. Men were ranged round the square courtyard, sitting with their backs to the wall, and seeing us at the door, they cried to us hospitably, "Enter, enter!" The aged Kochek in his white robes came forward to greet us with the utmost courtesy, smiling benignly. He moved as the host about the place. Part of the courtyard was in shade, but evening sunshine bathed the part that adjoined the low wall, separating the flags and lawn from the shrine, garden, with its olive and fig trees in young leaf. And the scene at Sheikh Mohammed on the eve of the vigil. There's an arch doorway, or maybe there's just it looks like there may just be an arch and not a house, but you can't see through the darkness of the arch, so maybe that there is a house there. And the Kochek stands, and that's obviously how you tell them apart, right? Well, dude's all in white and the other ones aren't as whitely dressed. We were bidden sit and took a place on a felt mat beside the Mukhtar, who with other Yazidi elders and notables had gathered here for the night's vigil. One of the Qawwals brought us coffee, the usual bitter mouthful, at the bottom of a handleless cup. In serving, the practice is to hold the cups packed one into the other in one hand, and to hold the brass coffee pot, Dilla, in the other. So here we sat in the forbidden place, at the forbidden hour, and no one had said us nay. I took note of our surroundings. The charm and peace of the scene past description. On the green grass, the center of the courtyard, stood an earthenware jar in a wooden stand, 2 amphora beside it, and a bowl for dipping out the cooled water. Also, there was an iron standard supporting an iron lamp, which stood on the grass upon the farther side of the paved path which led direct from the entrance to the door of the shrine. This lamp was of the pattern of the lamps in the temple of Sheikh Ada. That is, it was a square, shallow dish with 4 lips, in each of which a long wick is laid. I asked Rashid if this peculiar shape had not a meaning, and after a little hesitation he admitted that it had. It represents, he said, the 4 corners of the earth, the north, south, east, and west, and the road of the sun. His answer interested me, for the Parsis, when making the sign of the cross of their sacred foods, make the same explanation, and the Nestorian priest, making the sign of the cross over the sacramental wafers, murmurs from east to west, from north to south. In fact, it was yet another small piece of evidence that the cross in ritual is purely a sun symbol. Well, north to south, east to west, but north to south kind of indicates something too. Grass, because north, of course, is the direction that in that part of the world is attributed to the devil. Grass grew on either side of the central path, as in a college quadrangle, but a paving ran round the courtyard, and it was upon this that mats had been spread for the men who sat round the walls. These wore red turbans and multicolored belts. The dresses were mostly white and wholly oriental. Indeed, Jadon and ourselves, he in his uniform and we in our Western dress, were the only intrusions from modern Iraq and the 20th century. We entered the antechamber of the tomb, removing our shoes to do so, and there laid an offering, but did not attempt to enter the inner chamber lest it might grate upon their feelings. Although they showed not the slightest sign of objection, it had been easy, however, to glance inside, and the sarcophagus tomb within resembled that of any Muslim saint. It was covered with green and red silk drapings. In the antechamber, lamps for the sacred olive oil lay about the floor, 1 or 2 of them silvered over and fluted for wicks, the others, all of the Yazidi 4-wick shape. I like the 4-wicked round candles myself. The entrance to the shrine was constructed of carved gray Mosul marble and bore an inscription in Arabic which said that Sadiq ibn Rashid, that is Rashid's father, he having been named after his grandfather, had rebuilt the shrine in piety. We were careful on entering and leaving not to touch with our feet the threshold stone, high and broad, as in all Yazidi shrines. For this, would have been a pollution. We resumed our seats beside the Mukhtar, and besides us, a chamber was attached to the courtyard, where women sat and later busied themselves with the preparation of food. The Kochek, presiding over all, wore a tranquil and happy expression. It was the old man's day of days in the year, for the tomb is permanently in his charge, and all were his guests. Yazidis arrived constantly, and at their entrance looked neither to right nor left, but walked straight up the paved way to the shrine. About halfway they touched the breast with both hands, swept both hands upward with a brushing movement, and then brought them down strokingly on either side of the face and beard. At the entrance to the shrine, they stooped, bent, or knelt, kissed the threshold stone and both doorposts, also the stones by and inside the doorway, and went in. On emerging, they kissed the wall to the right of the shrine, and in each of which the lamp was burning. Presently, there was a slight stir by the outer doorway, and a little procession entered and moved silently forward, while everyone present rose to their feet. It was headed by the Kochek, looking like the prophet Eli. Eliyahu, probably Elijah. A kawal with a large tambor and another with a flute, and consisted of a man and two women, one of whom bore a child in her arms. At least this is what the mysterious object veiled with green silk proved to be when they all emerged from the shrine, where the green silk had been left on the tomb. The Mukhtar explained that the child had been sick and had bound the green silk to Sheikh Mohammed if he recovered. We had just seen the fulfillment of the vow, and on the morrow a man would climb up the whited fluted spire and fasten the green silk to the golden ball at the top, so that all the world might know the saint's clemency. As soon as the procession had issued, we all sat down again. From time to time, others arrived with votive gifts for the shrine. And whenever this happened, there was the same ceremonious entrance and general rising. Once it was an old man hugging a cone of sugar wrapped in its commercial blue wrapper. This would sweeten tea dispensed in hospitality at the holy place. From time to time, coffee was brought round to those sitting round the walls, ourselves included. After a while, there was another stir. Large objects wrapped in brown cloth were brought in and given to the quals who sat in the southern corner of the courtyard. And again, everyone rose to honor the sacred objects. The braziers by the quals were lit, and then they drew from the brown bags the large tambors of their culling, and warmed these by the braziers to tighten the skins. There were 3 qawwals with tambors and 2 younger qawwals with pipes. Again we resumed our seats, and the qawwals then began to chant to the tambors and pipes. The melody was very different from that we had heard at the tombs. It was less folk-like and difficult to follow, both as regards to rhythm and motive. The beating of the tambors was led by the senior qawwal. They were not always held still, but at an unseen sign from the leader were swept upwards, or thrust outwards and sideways, as if by a single impulse, like a wheeling flight of birds, always precisely together. Well, maybe he wasn't the one making the sign. Maybe it was tradition, or maybe there was something they were aware of. The chanting was low and in a major key. All present listened with reverent, attentive faces, and the prayer in Kurdish, which followed the chant, we heard the name Sheikh Adam. During the prayer, the men in the courtyard did not rise, but sat with open hands laid on their knees, palm upwards, finishing by stroking down their faces, like Muslimin when reciting the Fatiha, as a supplication. Because if you don't know any formula, Islam says just say the first chapter. When the prayer was ended, all rose to their feet, a second, and then sat again. A second chant followed, louder than the first and more vigorous in measure. I transcribe A's note about it. The rhythm of the Kurdish drums in the second chant was an 8 time, slightly syncopated. One phrase was repeated 16 or 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7, 8 tied together. One note, 4 beats. For example, then it changed to a chorus 4 times repeated of 8, with the accent on the first beat, the whole slightly faster than the first phrase, and quickening steadily to a final crash. And this appeared to be one verse. There were 4 or 5 verses, after which the rhythm changed abruptly to 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. Then suddenly reverted quickly. 4 times repeated, and getting quicker and louder until it ended in the biggest crash fall. This was accompanied by a flageolet discant played on 2 pipes like flageolets, but larger, and by low chanting from the quals in Kurdish. So 4 notes to 1 note to 4 beats, 1 note to 8 beats. You know, 1 over 1. I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to represent. I mean, exactly. But the Yazidi music stands apart. Adding to her description, the movement of the tambors was carried out vehemently and dramatically. First, the swing upwards, and then the thrust forwards, accompanied by intensified drumming of the fingers, which must be very strong to produce so loudest note. The simultaneous crashing of the surrounding jingles, inserted round the rim as in a tambourine, added a passion and excitement to the music, which it is difficult to convey by any imagery. The sun was setting, the swallows circled backwards and forwards, catching eating flies. Moreover, we could hear the agitated twitter of the bee-eaters, sure tokens that spring was with us. They had seen none of these lovely birds until that very morning. In the dusk, the old Kochek, a venerable figure in his white vestments, arose and poured olive oil into the standard lamp on the grass, and then lit it with a piece of flaming wood, first arranging the 4 wicks carefully into their grooves. His actions were erratic and grave. It was a priestly office. Rashid, who now came to sit by us, told us that the oil had been pressed from the olives within the precincts, and he indicated the shrine garden beyond the courtyard, the whole being enclosed by a high outer wall. We began to wonder whether we should stay. We did not wish to impose ourselves, I told Rashid, and as the sun had now set, the ceremonies of the night would begin. Therefore, We excused ourselves and would leave. He made a little speech to us, said so that all could hear. The devotions that went on this night, he said, were prayer and chanting such as that we had just heard, and which no one, not a Yazidi, had ever been privileged to hear in this holy place. Never before, he went on, had the Yazidis of Bashika admitted anyone into their shrine on this evening, and they would never do so again. They had invited us inside in order to show us especial honor and express their appreciation of our presence and friendship. This was their return. Had we been men, we could not have been admitted, but as women and as their friends, we were welcome to stay. They begged us, however, not to tell others that we had been present, lest they claimed a right to enter on precedent. We replied that we were deeply and truly touched by the honor shown to us and would never forget it. Neither would we publish abroad the privilege we had received. It may seem to those who read this that this very chapter violates our promise, but I think that the promise extracted referred to the people of the neighborhood rather than to the world at large, and to these we said nothing. I write this, therefore, in the conviction that no one will ever force themselves uninvited upon these gentle and courteous people, or distress them by importuning them for privileges which they will only yield unasked. I work upon the system of waiting until I am freely invited behind the forbidden doors, and find that it is both the wisest and infinitely the surest method of getting information. Sitting confidently beside us, Rashid indicated a gravestone in the paving and told me that his eldest brother was buried there, basely murdered by Turkish officials just before the retreat during the last war. He was then in a garden near Tel Bila, which belonged to the family. The Turks came at night, and beating the gate, asked for hospitality, which was given them. My uncle received them, and then they asked for my brother by name. My uncle took them to where my brother lay asleep, and they emptied their revolvers into his sleeping body. He never knew of their treachery. By God, you have seen my mother, and how old and frail she looks. Her old age dates from that time. For 5 years, we wept and hardly ate. He was the best of all of us, and my father has not been the same man since that day. There was a hum and stir outside, and we were told that Baba Sheikh, the religious head of all the Yazidis, had arrived. All rose. The women trilled their shrill halhela, and a train of people entered. The Baba Sheikh is a tall and upright and aged man. He wears his high white turban low over his eyes. He wore pure white and a black sash around his waist. His woolen cloak was of white homespun. A pace behind him walked his son, a swarthy and elderly man. My eye caught him for a moment near a lay Yazidi with a shock of blonde hair brushing out beneath his cap, and a long fair mustache, recalling a figure in a medieval German painting. And I realized how far removed the Sheikh class is in racial type. The Baba Sheikh's son, like many of his caste, was dark and not unlike an Afghan. The Sheikh advanced with stateliness. The nobles greeted him respectfully standing. He went round the courtyard, kissing the walls in several places, and when he reached the shrine, he saluted the doorpost in the same way. Passing round the assembly, he addressed a few words here and there, offering his hand to each man in turn to be kissed. The hand kissing was thus: the layman kissed the Sheikh's hand and lifted it to his forehead, and then the Sheikh raised the hand the layman had saluted towards his own mouth as if to convey the kiss thither. When he came upon us in our corner, he checked, and then passing over us as if we had not existed, He proceeded to our left-hand neighbor. When he returned to his place above us, near the shrine, we saw Rashid and his father approach him and make evident explanations. A message was brought us that we might approach him. The Baba Sheikh and his host, Sadiq ibn Rashid, is an illustration. So they have a solid white garment over cloak and either turbans or what's that type of hat that's shaped like an upside down tin? A cylinder, feeling somewhat like wasps in a beehive. We did so, and I said in a low voice some words of welcome, expressed our sense of the honor done to us by the permission to remain, and our hope that his journey had not wearied him. My words were translated as the Sheikh knows no Arabic. He was gracious, and again we retired to our corner. Presently we saw the women in the serving chamber busy preparing large bowls of harissa in Lower Iraq. Harissa is a pilgrim diet, and I knew it for what it was: a rich broth porridge, nourishing and palatable, easily heated on or after a journey. A huge wooden spoon stood against the wall. It had been used to ladle the pottage into the bowls. A leather-covered cushion was placed before the sheikh, and upon this were piled many flat, thin loaves of Kurdish bread, together with meat, and a bowl of harissa, bowls of harissa, in which several wooden spoons were laid, and bowls of hot meat were then put at intervals all around the courtyard, so that all might eat several from each bowl. We ate like the rest, and then more coffee was served round by the coffee maker. It was growing late. The sheikh, enthroned on a sheepskin, had finished his meal, and his pipe was produced, a prodigious length, certainly 4 feet from the small bowl to the magnificent round amber mouthpiece. His son, standing respectably before him, lit it, but in so doing managed to break the earthenware bowl. Another was quickly produced and fitted, and then the lit pipe was handed to His Holiness. The sheikh had a large square embroidered tobacco bag. From time to time he honored someone in the courtyard by passing it to him and inviting him to help himself. Jadon, to whom the sheikh had addressed a few words, was gratified when asked to roll himself a cigarette. He had no qalaun from the great man's pouch. A and I coveted these Kurdish tobacco bags. They were of home-blown cloth, often dipped in some gay dye, joyous colored, and stitched with orange or green, and sometimes, as was this of the Baba Sheikh, they were embroidered. All told us that the night's vigil would be spent in chanting and prayer, like the chanting and prayer you have seen, Rashid told us, and they bring refreshments and coffee from time to time. Khatun, now you have seen and know what we do here. Stay if you like, but I fear you will become tired needlessly. I took the hint and rose to go, taking leave of the sheikh and saluting the Mukhtar. We passed out through the forbidden portal and went back in the silent moonlight.